Good evening. Is this on? Yeah. That's a silly question, isn't it? Excuse me. Everybody always asks that. Who does these things? Is the mic on? My name's Andrew Roth. I'm a scholar in residence at the Jefferson Educational Society. And tonight's program, even though it's at the Corey Higher Ed Center, is actually sponsored by the Jefferson Educational Society, particularly a group that Kat is a member of, the Jefferson Civic Leadership Academy. In fact, I think Kat, I know, is actually a graduate of this year's cohort. More importantly, her presentation is part of what we do in the Leadership Academy. Actually, it's a part of what a small group of people in the Leadership Academy. Leadership Academy usually has 25 or 30 people a year, but only 4 or 5 of them become or do what we call Raimy Fellows in honor of the benefactor, Bruce Raimy. And a Raimy Fellow is a person who does 2 things. One, they do a little mini seminar in leadership, but the most important thing they do is they do a research project on something of community value or of value to their community. Last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, Chelsea, Sarah McCall did a program on using libraries as a focal point for combating the loneliness epidemic. Tomorrow, Allie Eagle will be doing an all-day workshop on women's rights and empowering women. But tonight, Kat is going to talk about creating an autism support hub, a rural autism support hub. And that's an extremely important thing to do. And I was very impressed when Kat proposed this idea. And then I've been very impressed for the last 7 or 8 months, working with her as she did it for 2 reasons. One, I'm currently writing a book on leadership. And one of the things I say about leaders are people who make a difference. They are people who take the initiative to change things. And that Kat is doing this project not only to fulfill a requirement to become a Raimy Fellow, but actually as a real world proposal, makes her a leader, as a person who has the nerve, the courage, the initiative, whatever you want to call it, to stand up and try to start something new and different. The other reason I was impressed with it is the concept itself. The concept of a rural autism hub is one of those things that has incredible potential for Corey. On the one hand, and maybe Matt would disagree with me a little bit, but on the one hand, the least important, but not unimportant, is that it actually can become an economic driver. That might strike people as, wait, what are you talking about? How can this be an economic driver? But as you will hear in Kat's presentation, she's talking about creating a hub that would service people in a radius of 35 miles or 35 to 50 miles in all directions, because using Corey as the center of that circle, because there isn't any such service. And it's not entirely impossible. I mean, you have to think big dreams. If you don't think big dreams, you end up accomplishing little things. If you say, all I'm going to do is this, that's all you end up doing. If you say, I'm going to try this, you may never get there, but you might get here. And so I always encourage the people I work with to think big. Not foolishly, but constructively, but to think big. And it occurred to me, my wife Judy recently had a knee replacement. It probably never occurred to anyone 15 or 20 years ago that 6 doctors could build a practice in Meadville, Pennsylvania that made them a 5-state center for knee and hip replacements. And of course that was driven, much like Kat, that was driven by one of those doctors, Ryan Molly's, a Meadville native. And he wanted to do it, and he didn't want to leave his hometown. And I suspect when he first proposed that to whoever he proposed it to, must be 20 plus years now, somebody looked at him like, really? People are going to come to Meadville? Well, they did. So well, similarly, some people, when they hear Kat's proposal, might say, people are going to come to Corey? Well, yeah, if you build something of sufficient excellence that actually, well, there's no question there's a need, that actually meets the need, people will come. And the second reason I was impressed with this is this will be the 3rd time I have had, well, 2 times I've had a direct involvement in creating autism centers. I worked with the late Dr. Barbara Weigert to start the autism program at Mercyhurst College. And then when I was the president of a college in Cleveland, I started another autism center that is a flourishing thing. And when Kat proposed this to me, I thought, this is important. And one of the other reasons I thought it's important is children young adults who are somewhere on the autism spectrum are frequently cast in a negative light. Sometimes it's said by some people, oh, it's a program for dummies. And that actually rankles me because I actually am on the mild end of the autism spectrum and I have a learning disability. And one of the reasons I started those programs was when I discovered that I had the learning disability I have is called dyscalculia, which is the arithmetical version of dyslexia. That, to make a long story short, growing up, my 8th grade, 7th grade teacher always told me, do everything, math teacher, said, you always do everything right and then you make a stupid mistake. Well, I just thought I was stupid. Now, in fairness to Mr. Williams, I'm not going to throw Mr. Williams under the bus 60 years later. Actually, 65 years later. I'm not going to, because he was probably 25 years old then, 28. And from what he knew, I did everything right and then would make a stupid mistake. So I went through most of school thinking I was a mathematical illiterate until I decided in my late 20s I wanted to get an MBA. And when I did an MBA, master's degree in business administration, and when I did that 40-some years ago, you had to be able to do calculus through differential equations. So I sat down, this is how long ago it was, you didn't get an app. You went to a bookstore and you got a book, Sham's Outline Guides, and I taught myself algebra from elementary algebra through differential equations. And I made myself do every problem in every line. And I get the wrong answer. And I go, that can't be right. I just did it. And I discovered I flipped numbers. I would write 98, 80, somewhere in a 6-digit number, I would flip numbers. And so I thought, oh, that's what Mr. Williams meant. And so years later, when I was doing the program in Cleveland, we worked with the Cleveland Clinic, and Dr. Michael Manos, who's an autism expert, was sitting next to me, and I was one of these functions where I'm welcoming it's a dinner thing, raising money. And I'm telling this story, and I heard him say under his breath, it's dyscalculia. So when I sat down, I said, it has a name? He goes, yeah, it's dyscalculia. He says to me, can you do math in your head? I said, well, I don't know that I would dignify it by calling it math, but I can do arithmetic in my head. He goes, yeah, it goes wrong when you write it down. You flip numbers. He said, by the way, you self-diagnosed, and that's the only therapy. There's no way to fix it. You just have to simply be conscious of it. So if you gave me a phone number, well, nowadays, I don't know that I'd write it down, I'd enter it in a phone, so typing is a little bit different. But if I wrote it down, I would read it back to you to make sure I hadn't flipped numbers. So I have a personal interest in this, and I think it's an extremely valuable thing and an extremely valuable service to parents and children and to young adults for the Corey area that has great potential for Corey. And so I really commend Kat for doing it. Now, as I look around the room and I noticed her making eye contact with everyone who entered, I suspect I don't really have to introduce her. She's a Corey native. She's a member of the Corey School District Board of Directors. She is the assistant director here at the Corey Higher Education Council. She tells me what she is. I've already mentioned she completed the Jefferson Civic Leadership Academy, and she has 2 degrees from Arizona State University. She likes to hike the trails and apparently is a gardener because you collect plants. But most importantly, beyond all of that, she's the loving mother of 2 children who, as she will be frank with you as she does this presentation, are on the autism spectrum. So, Kat?
Thank you, Dr. Roth. As Dr. Roth stated, I am Kat DiVittorio, and I am very excited to present my Raimy Fellowship, Realizing the Need for an Autism Support School and Hub in Rural Pennsylvania. You guys are gonna have to bear with me. I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm really excited, so. Through this presentation, I plan on defining autism, explaining the need for a hub in Corey, explaining what already exists in the area, talking about what I wanna do here, and then the steps that it takes to get where I wanna be. How do we define autism spectrum disorder? Autism spectrum disorder, hereby referred to as ASD in the rest of my presentation, is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. Autism spectrum disorder is broken up into 3 levels, which is usually based off the amount of support that a person needs within their daily life. Level 1 is classified as high-functioning autism. It is classified that a person may be able to live independently with minimal support. Level 2 states that this person would require significant assistance to help with communication, lifestyle, and additional issues. Level 3 requires very substantial support and depends upon others to help with daily lives. This is often referred to as profound autism. Now, these definitions specifically come from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. However, the DSM-5 is not capable of fully capturing ASD traits, as they can vary from day to day and person from person. As Dr. Stephen Shore stated, if I've met one person with autism, I've met one person with autism. The diagnosis and severity can actually change in autism over time with schooling, and it can actually increase or decrease depending on their social skills and what they're met with through therapies and different educations. Traditional schooling often has an inability to work with students diagnosed with level 2 and 3, as many traditional public schools follow the guidelines set by the Free and Appropriate Public Education Act. However, these guidelines are not made with ASD students in mind. A large percentage of ASD students actually receive support therapies, reported as 64% using IEPs and other therapeutic reporting systems. These support therapies cover, but are not completely limited to, occupational therapy, behavior support therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. The public school requirements offered for support therapies only include 1 day of up to 2 hours implemented in-school therapy a week. However, the Children's Autism Center reports that the best practices state each student should be receiving no less than 25 and up to 40 hours of one-on-one therapy sessions per therapy per prescribed type. And these are my babies, okay? My little boy is Nicholas, he's 6 now, and my baby girl is Emily, and she is 14. All of the above listed information was completely brand new to me 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I was told that Nicholas had a speech delay and that he would be receiving in-person speech therapies. After a few months of those in-person speech therapies, I was told by his speech therapist that she recommended I talk to his doctor about a potential autism diagnosis. I talked to his doctor said, oh, absolutely, I think that he's autistic. He should probably go to Pittsburgh because that's the closest place to give him an accurate diagnosis with what we think is going on with him. We drove 2 hours, spent 2 days doing 2 to 3 hours of therapy and diagnosis each day for a doctor that had never met my son before to tell me, yes, he's nonverbal autistic, he's level 3, he might never talk. Told me how many hours of therapy he could actually have and then sent us on our way. It was a shock, even though it wasn't a shock. We knew my son was autistic. Before we ever set foot in that building, we knew that that was what his diagnosis was going to be. The shock came from the amount of hours that they prescribed for him for therapies that don't exist in Corey. The shock came from the lack of support that came. And then in addition, came from my son's primary care physician telling me that she knew he was autistic up to a year before, but didn't want to make things difficult for me by telling me in advance. So we had left an entire year of early intervention services because somebody else made that decision for me. This was a huge step in trying to build this school for me because I noticed a distinct lack of services in our area for my son. It ultimately led for me to get my daughter diagnosed, and she is only level 1 autistic, but she'll tell you that she has dyspraxia, which we also had to go to Pittsburgh to get a diagnosis for because of the specialization. According to the CDC, 1 in 36 children are identified with having autism spectrum disorder. This makes me think of a moment in a board meeting I had last week with the Autism Society Northwestern Pennsylvania, where I was explaining that I had to go 2 hours for diagnosis, and one of my fellow directors said to me in a consoling manner, everybody here has a diagnosis story. And I realized that I'm not alone in the trauma of just being told, here's your diagnosis, go into the world and figure it out yourself. So if it's that bad for me, and there's 1 in 36 in Corey, then something needs to change. This is indicative of the fact that 2% of pediatric population total is diagnosed with autism. The latest autism census in the state of Pennsylvania was in 2011, and it diagnosed that 155,000 pediatrics birth through 19 are identified as being on the autism spectrum. This puts the state of Pennsylvania at 5% of the entire population of pediatrics, which is 3% more than the national average. And the national average has increased steadily over the last few years, which would kind of lead us to believe that since 2011, there's probably more of an increase in that percentage than we know. Now, if we're looking specifically at rural statistics, the Corey Area School District serves 1,850 students that cover 3 counties, Erie, Warren, and Crawford. Of this 1,850 students, 459 students were identified to have special education needs specific to autism, which means that 25% of the student body is special education. With the counties served, the only place to offer diagnosis near the city of Corey is the Achievement Center, and that is a 2-part. You start in Corey, you end up going to Erie for the final parts for your diagnosis, which is 35 miles away. There are also more severe diagnoses that are taking place in Pittsburgh or Cleveland. Those are the closest, larger facilities for that specific diagnosis. Now, this doesn't seem like a big deal if you have support. This doesn't feel like a big deal if you can drive. This doesn't feel like a big deal if you've never dealt with it. However, in 2024, the Corey Higher Education Council performed a community needs assessment, and we were able to state that transportation and childcare are big barriers of access to different things like care and workforce. If you don't have the ability to drive to Erie, you're not going to have that support to get that diagnosis, even if it's just the Achievement Center. If you don't have the ability to drive, how are you supposed to get to Pittsburgh? This is kind of indicative that there's a largely underserved population of neurodivergent individuals living miles away where there is no services they can receive to suit their needs or appropriate schooling and diagnosis for pediatrics. Now, with all of these issues stated, there is a solution that is not only beneficial to Corey, but a corridor of services with a population within 30 miles and beyond, which would be a facility offering schooling, diagnosis, and therapy, which would be located with Corey, PA, acting as a center of the hub. This would start with diagnosis. As the Achievement Center operates through LECOM Health as a full-service stop for behavioral health needs, it does not operate specific to the autism ASD community. It actually operates as a full mental health organization. The closest convenient one-stop shop for diagnosis is 128 miles away that specifies specifically an autism spectrum disorder. Corey, Pennsylvania is a centralized hub to 3 mid-sized cities, Erie, Meadville, and Jamestown, New York, and 3 large cities, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Buffalo, which would be the center point of those locations. Creating a facility in this centralized spot would offer not only accessible diagnosis, but an ability to do therapies in a corridor without the access of barriers such as transportation. Local service centers can include the Gertrude Barber Center, which is 35 miles away from Corey and does not offer an appropriate alternative for day programs. The center does specialize in full spectrum of developmental disabilities, but does not specialize in autism support entirely. The IU5 is actually the service center that operates through the school districts in the Corey area. And although they cover a multiple different programs for the school district, it again is not a one-stop shop for autism. The Achievement Center, as we stated above, is behavioral health support, but requires travel for many of the services, including the complete speech therapy that they offered my son. And then the behavior support therapy in this area is offered through them, and there is a multi-year wait list. My son has been on it for 2 years now. At this time, the only educational path in the Corey Area School District is the autism support classrooms located within the public school systems or homeschooling. The classes are facilitated with the IU5, and while they meet the public standard for schooling, they leave much to be lacking. The para support personnel position, which is hired through the school district, does not require any specific degree training or background in autism support, and only 2 days of training are required for that position by the state. They can move somebody from one position into that position within 2 days of training. The paraeducator positions, which would be the teacher positions in an autism support classroom, do not even require the 4 full years of most teachers in the United States. You can become a paraeducator after 2 years. There are 3 close schools that are tailored for the pediatric autism community. That's the Presley Ridge Autism School, which is right outside of Pittsburgh, 161 miles away, and then the Hope Center for Autism, which has 2 campuses, one outside of Youngstown, 102 miles away, and one outside Cleveland, 133 miles away. The average cost of an autism school is $75,000 a year, which is often an unattainable cost barrier in low-income areas for Corey and the surrounding areas. The New Hope Academy is the private school associated with the New Hope Pediatric Therapy Center, and that is the one that is outside of Pittsburgh right now. In addition to private standalone schools, there is an existing model called the Stepping Stones Group. The Stepping Stones Group is a contract staffing group that sends therapists directly into the home, essentially eliminating the need for outpatient services. It is used in some rural areas depending on availability of services. However, it is often costly, and it only works through private insurance. State insurances don't apply for this. In addition to that, it does have to work directly with the insurances to the capacity to fill community needs. So if there's a greater need than they have therapists for it, it is not a sustainable model. The Bridge School is a nonprofit school. It actually operates as both a nonprofit organization and a school. It focuses on autism support, and they have the really interesting model where they use full inclusive augmentation, alternative means of communication, and adaptive and assistant technologies. And if you don't go to their school, they will come to your school and make sure that that curriculum is adapted. The price that goes along with partnering with the Bridge School or sending your child to the Bridge School is upwards of $150,000 a year, and they do not go through insurances for that. Now, with these existing models, we do see a tremendous amount of insight and forward thinking into the most important thing for a student on the autism spectrum, that is whole person development. Looking at schools that offer small class size and therapy gap bridges are a really great model, especially when we're comparing to what we can do in a public school system. And in addition to this, a lot of these schools are willing to offer knowledgeable guidance in order to create a hub in an area where there's a gap. Now, obviously, if there weren't shortcomings in these models, I would have no Raimy project at all. So these organizations do not solve the crisis of the Corey autism community. The travel time for rural residents is impossible for, say, taking your child to school every day outside of Pittsburgh or taking your child to school every day outside of Cleveland. In addition to that, organizations each hold a piece of a whole picture. If we're trying to bring together a whole person approach, we would want something with adaptive devices. We would want something with therapies that were right on site. We would want something with the ability to have schooling in small classroom sizes. And then in addition to this, even in the case of the nonprofits, the cost barrier for this area is impossible. It's oftentimes more than an entire family in Corey makes per year median income. So my proposed solution is a one-stop shop autistic support hub that offers services to a 35-mile plus radius. It would technically be more like 70, where at the center it would be 35 one direction, 35 the other direction, all the way around. This would start with diagnosis, it would continue into early intervention services and schooling, and then it would have therapy implemented within the same building. It's not a completely unheard of model. There have been several autistic schools, especially that have specifically been more toward the grade school levels that have done this. It's just one that would serve as an area that's greater than they typically see. Now, if we are able to use the models that other educational facilities have created in their institutions, we would be able to move forward with that. There is an actual 12-step guide. That's what's required in opening a school in Pennsylvania, and I was able to obtain that from one of the schools that used it. There are several things that can be done during the interim of opening the doors of a fully functioning school, which is kind of where we're starting. The 12-step organizational process that makes the most sense includes the following steps: finding community, determining a type of school, creating an advisory board, designing the school's curriculum, requirements for opening up a school as far as legal or operational, funding options, creating a budget and business plan, addressing staffing needs, selecting the right facility, developing a school policy and procedure, selecting accreditations, and developing a marketing plan. Now, breaking it down, steps 1 through 3, we're pretty fortunate. Community is pretty self-explanatory. We're clearly marketing this toward parents of children with autism, parents who may suspect their children have autism, and their families, as that's the community that we're looking for. The school type, obviously, would be a privatized autism spectrum disorder school. It would be a new type of school, as it would also implement medical facility on site. And then we are currently in the process of figuring out who we want to contact for an advisory board. So those are really easy steps. Curriculum and requirements are a little bit more specific to Pennsylvania State. To come up with a curriculum, guidelines within the Pennsylvania State Educational Authority will be looked at, and it will also be the job of the advising board to compare and select a curriculum based on presented nationally rated options. Examples of this include the STAR Autism Support Curriculum and Rethink Ed curriculums, both of which are nationally recognized and available for implementation into private autism education organizations. Legal requirements follow licensing procedures that the state has predetermined. This step requires retention of a solicitor. I'm actually through most of the steps for organizing. I have my business license, my 501c3, and my EIN already completed. So those are mostly finished to actually open the school. Using existing available budget models, cost assessments, and looking at funding capital would be how we would begin to build an overview of the budget required for the school. There are models that already exist to be implemented. They just need to be tweaked to incorporate more how to work in a rural area. The private equity business model in autism services is one of the most modifiable budgets and fiscal plans that would be discussed with implementation. Some major financial holdings are planned through partnerships, which is how therapists and diagnosis will also be brought in. The key factors, one of the biggest draws of this, which will be bringing in a broader community to show support and create a pipeline for potential students from early intervention to post-graduation. There are existing business models that already exist for schools using similar education styles, and as such, it would become a template for those based on a similar needs assessment. So if another school wanted to open, we would absolutely give the budget to those people to see how to move forward as well. Staffing needs are a much broader issue to do in an autism school setting. There are 3 types of staffing classifications: diagnosis and treatment staff, education and support staff, and administration staff. We would have to determine how many students would be served within the 35-mile radius, and that would determine how many staff we would need. When we break down these staff, we would have to look into psychiatrists, psychologists, neuropsychologists for diagnosis, occupational therapists, physical therapists, behavior support therapists, speech therapists, and then we would also need teachers, paraprofessionals, wraparounds, facilities, and janitorial staff, as well as superintendents, principals, and office staff. All of these are attainable within the business model that we've already presented, and I can kind of talk about the economic development portion of that later on as well. So a faculty would be required to house this institution, and it would be paramount. One such building currently exists in the Corey area, and it is empty. It is the former Corey Memorial Hospital, which is pictured in the slideshow. The building has the size requirements as well as clinical space for therapy and diagnosis. This is just one example of what kind of facility would be optimal for the institution. Others could be found or built as well. Policies and procedures. Our policies would rely heavily on pre-existing templates. We're not trying to recreate the wheel. We're just trying to implement something that would work the best we could in the Corey area. It would be a combination of those pre-existing policies, using board guidance for reference, and circling back further with a legal solicitor. The collaborative work would be a guiding framework on the policies and procedures the institution would be run by. It would be, one of the things we would do first is create a survey of the local parents of children with autism to see what they're looking for the most and to see how we would implement that as well. With this work, the accreditation would be the next and final step into the actual formation of the school. It would include the presentation of all the above information being submitted under the solicitor again. Marketing, we would take a multi-tiered approach that would include public roundtables to discuss with the community, conventional strategies such as digital marketing and information distribution, and then finally we would use things like websites, social media, and other marketing campaigns to step forward. To conclude, as a mother of children on the spectrum and learning to navigate the world with little to no local support, creating a one-stop shop to gain education, early interventive services, diagnosis, and support is something that would have absolutely changed the world for me during diagnosis. I am very fortunate that now, at the point that I'm at, I have found a community. I will absolutely refer anybody to the Autism Society Northwestern Pennsylvania. That has been a lifesaver for me in finding that. I would tell anybody who is a parent with a child on the spectrum to look at all your options, to keep pushing, and it shouldn't be done alone. It doesn't have to be done alone. There are measurable implemented steps that we can follow in order to foster and build community, and so much has already gone under the radar that we can actually implement these steps and make this an effectual difference. I would ask that if any of this resonates with you, please reach out to me. Whether you're struggling yourself to find a community, whether you know someone who would want to get involved with this as I make this happen, or if you just have more questions and I don't answer them tonight, please just come find me. I'm here literally all the time. So my call to action tonight is you, everyone in the room, everyone who has need of this, and anybody who might be involved. And then I also just want to thank Dr. Roth for all of his guidance tonight. And I want to thank my boss and my staff for letting me sound all of this off them repeatedly. And everybody, thank you for being here tonight. And I'll answer questions. And I talked way too fast. This was supposed to be an hour, and I just rambled. So thank you. Sorry, Tim, I blocked you.
You are all good. We're just going to have people, if you have questions, to talk into the microphone since we are recording, just so that we can hear it later.
What level of spectrum disorder will be eligible for services?
I really want to put this more toward the level 2, level 3 profound autism, as a lot of people with level 2 or level 3 autism, they are not given the services they need. This would primarily service level 3. Obviously, it would be a need-by-need basis. There would be an intake process. If there's diagnosis needs or therapy needs, this would service everybody, as it is separate from the school. So it's kind of everybody's need in the therapy, but as far as schooling goes, level 2 and level 3 would be.
Maybe for the benefit of some people in the room, could you explain what the levels mean?
Yes, so level 1 is that they do not need significant amount of help, and they might be able to function as a neurotypical person would be able to in their daily life. Level 2 would need significant support in being able to progress through their day, and then level 3 profound autism would need complete support in order to function through their day-to-day, and they may be nonverbal and need significant support most of their lives.
You mentioned that some of the schools cost $75,000, $150,000. What would be the cost for people going to your school, and how is it funded?
So because of the fact that we're doing this as a medical model attached to a school, we are actually able to charge the insurance to make this a no cost out of pocket model for the entire community. The entire point is that these hours of schooling actually count as therapy hours, and the typical need of therapy for profound autism or for level 2 autism is actually higher than that of a school hour week. So we would actually be able to, if implemented properly, do this for free for the community, which is very important to me. Removing barriers for cost is one of the most important things in this. So, thanks, Chad.
You also mentioned that transportation was an issue. Would there be a wraparound service for that?
We are looking into the costs associated with creating an actual fleet of passenger vans. It would be able to address the needs for transportation. It would be the same as private schooling. There would be requirements, obviously, like the need of nursing and para to student, but that is something that when I look at my business model, which I actually have here with me, that is implemented as well. Yeah, so thanks, Jack.
I just have a question kind of going forward, like looking ahead, because I am the mother of 2 individuals that are autistic.
Okay.
I'm got one with me tonight. He was really excited because, you know, he got diagnosed really early on, and, you know, but he's now 28. So I think the important thing, maybe when you're looking at things, there's a lot of people that are further along, and so I think using a lot of the resources, because there's a lot of people that have been there, done that. And, you know, like I live in Crawford County, so when I was trying to get services, I had to go through the county. So, I mean, you know, and with us living in a rural area, like it's so difficult. And I think COVID made it even worse. I think it really emphasized how important this need is. And I want to tell you, this is a fabulous idea.
Thank you so much.
This is a fabulous idea.
I actually have a plan of implementation for a community after graduation. This right now is taking up all my time, but I do have.
You got to start there.
Well,
Yes,
that's it. Like I have to start
exactly.
at
You gotta
school age,
start
but
there.
there is a community base after, because obviously, as a parent of a profoundly autistic son, my biggest fear is what happens if something happens to me, and then my support system is gone. I mean, I have my parents and I have my sister, but they're the same. My sister's 3 years younger than me, and my parents are obviously older than me. So if I'm gone and they're gone, what happens to my son? So this is the first step. The next step after that is after that too.
Exactly, and that's it. But you're doing a fabulous job, and I
Thank
want
you.
to tell you, this is a great idea.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Hi, how are you?
Well, how are you?
Yeah, no, I agree. What a different way to think about things. It's kind of exciting. I have a question about the staffing, because I related to you when you talked about how paraprofessionals need 2 days training. And so all the people that you had talked about that would be needed to run this, what are your thoughts on how to get them here into Corey? What's the incentive to
I love
come?
this. Okay. So if I got one of my big plans is, one of the biggest issues in Corey is there's a housing crisis, and we obviously have brain drain. My boss is really big into economic development, so he tells me all these terrifying books and how we have to fix Corey, and it just gives me nightmares. So if we actually were able to, when we are able to create the facility or get the facility, I'm actually going to be using 2 floors to make apartments for single or small families. They will be secured from the outside. There will only be access like from an outside perspective, because obviously you don't want your house in there. But we would be scouting from special education schools that we want to. We would give that as part of a salary incentive. We'd be like, hey, if you move here, here's housing for you for like the foreseeable future. Come here, we'll put this in part of your salary. Like there's a small apartment for you. And that way we can bring people in. It fixes the problem of brain drain. It fixes the problem of like having nobody around here. And when you're younger, when you're like looking to make a difference, like you want something with a bigger salary, you want something that kind of has that incentive. So that's my plan right now. If that doesn't work, then we're going to reevaluate. But yes.
Kind of along those lines, I have another thought or idea. There are a number of retired educators in our area. Like I know some folks that that might be a pool area to look at. As far as even some of them might even be willing to volunteer. You know, they have their certificates and they're able to do that are recently retired.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
What's your projected opening date? When do you want to have this done by?
So within 5 years is my projected opening date. The biggest issue is obviously going to be construction. I have to obtain the property that I want to. I am well in the beginning processes of this. I have, like I said, I have the EIN, the business proposal. I got my really exciting business plan. I was really excited about this. I finished this last week. It's pretty big, pretty hefty. I have all of the things necessary to start this. I am now in the process of trying to form partnerships. I am trying to start reaching out to people to obtain the building, to obtain a partnership medically, because obviously for the diagnosis and the therapies, we want real diagnoses and real therapies. When my son was going to speech therapy here, I loved the woman who helped me, but she said, I can't do nonverbal, I do speech delays. So it's one of those situations where I want somebody who specializes in these things. So forming those partnerships, getting them to come in. 5 years is the long. I would love to say 2 years, but that would mean everything has to happen tomorrow. So
Yeah, I did want to say thank you. And I have a grandson who's autistic, and as probably everybody in this room can tell you, it's been maddening trying to get him the help he needs. Even now he has one therapy, and that's all we have.
Yes.
Even though we've been through agencies in Erie, we've been everywhere. So this is huge. Thank you very, very much. So the other thing was, I'm just a little confused, and maybe I should understand. Does the school for level 2 and 3, does it replace the school district?
yes, it would.
Okay.
It would actually be a full service school in addition to the medical facility. It would be a private school instead of going through public schools. The reason that it has the attachment to the medical facility is because that's how we're able to remove the cost barrier. By making it a therapy as well as an education, you're able to charge the insurance. And in the state of Pennsylvania, every single child with autism spectrum disorder is guaranteed state insurance. So we are able to ensure that everybody has that cost barrier removed, goes to a regular school, and is implemented like the education they're able to access the way they're able to access it versus the way that we're trying to fit into public school with. And then I would refer you to the Autism Society for if you're trying to find services. I use them for like my sounding board on things. So they have all their information over there too. So if you want to pick that up, yeah. So and Tish is here. She's the director. She's fantastic. She can answer all the questions. She answers my questions. So.
Hey, in the back.
Hi, Chelsea.
Congratulations, Raimy Fellow. Again, echoing everyone's comments about how awesome this idea is and how much it will completely change how Corey operates. So thank you for your willingness to create it. What is one thing each of us can do to make sure it actually happens and in the time frame that you would like it to?
So if there is anybody that anybody here knows that would want to be involved, have them reach out to me. If there is anybody who knows of anybody who has a skill that they could help me with. Like I know that I got my website domains on Friday just because I was so afraid that I would lose my URL or whatever. And within an hour of posting it, somebody built me a logo and somebody built me a website like within the day. And those are skills that I don't have. So like anything that anybody thinks they can do to help, please reach out to me. Any partnerships, anything. I am willing to learn from anybody. I am willing to work with anybody. Like anybody has like $5 billion they want to throw my way. I can get it done in a week. You guys give me $5 billion. So like any of that, like anybody wants to reach out to me, I am willing to make connections. I am willing to, I'll ask anybody any questions. So yeah. Thanks.
Hi, I was just wondering, so I am a child and adolescent mental health nurse practitioner with the Achievement Center, and I go to different schools in Erie County. And I was just wondering if you've reached out to like LECOM or to the Achievement Center and like discuss this and like see if they've had any interest with it.
So right now I only have one email out as I haven't gotten to talk to the Achievement Center or LECOM about it yet. I wasn't sure, but I mean, that is the process that I'm in right now, is starting to reach out to partnerships. So there will be emails soon, like emailing, phone calls soon. I right now, I wanted to make sure I had all of my legal documents in order before I started making like, let's make a partnership asks. So they're not just like, you're just some random person off the street, but that is the step I'm in now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, just to speak to the need of it, I mean, I I have over 450 patients and like a high level have, you know, ASD, and it's hard for me because in my position, like because there's limited providers that prescribe medication, like that is my job. That's the only thing I'm allowed to do because I'm not able to do like therapies with any of my patients because there's such a high need for medications or appointments are short. But regardless, just speaking to the frustration that we've had over the past, I mean, since I transitioned into my role as an NP over 3 years ago, just like you said, like the wait list for IBHS services is years, and like there's no follow-up, there's nothing that happens. Like I write this order, it goes, and you know, I'm like, well, did anyone call you? Have you contacted anyone? They're like, oh yeah, they just said we're on the waiting list, and then next thing you know, like they're like, oh, we didn't have any, like you don't exist, like we don't know what you're talking about. And so it's so sad because I have these parents that are struggling, and some, like, you know, they've lost their job because of how many times they've had to pick up their child from school, and you know, the lack of support, and you know, are trying the homeschooling option but struggling there. So I'm just, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll reach out to you afterwards. But
I've heard so many issues with the staffing issues. I mean, I just went through the JCLA, and we were talking about the fact that like mental health professionals in general, there's just nobody, and then you're just given patient after patient after patient after patient until burnout. So yeah, that for sure makes sense. But yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, again, I will direct everybody to the Autism Society's information in case anybody was looking for any support. I'm hoping we're talking about maybe getting a Lego club started down here just for some socialization. Right now, both of my kiddos are homeschooled. My oldest goes to track, so she does get out and actually talks to people sometimes, but I never let my youngest leave because I have nobody to have him spend time with, so we're working on bringing him there, and he doesn't love the 45-minute car ride to Erie yet, so we're going to try to make things work out there. And
Can I mention something?
yes.
So my name is Emily Walker, and I provide early intervention services in Erie County. I have a team that supplies services, OT, speech, special instruction, in 6 counties in northwestern Pennsylvania. One thing that we're doing, that I've been doing in Corey for a while, and then we dropped off over the winter, is a parent meetup group in Corey.
Okay.
So and I have flyers with me, but it's going to be Saturday, March 29th at the relevant church from 10 to 11:30, and any families are welcome to come and join us, grandparents, kids, whoever, and we just play. Like literally we play, and I try to get the parents to talk. So it's going to be a monthly thing. There are other things we can do in that. I've run Lego groups before. There's all kinds of things we can do. If the need is there and people will show up, I will gladly show up and bring all my stuff. So there's things that we can do that I'm more than willing to do. So I just wanted to share about the parent meetup group, though, and I did bring flyers tonight. So if anybody wants a flyer, see me before you leave. I will hang out.
Perfect. Thank you. I think besides that, I think we're done. And thank you everybody for coming. Thank you.